Hey everyone, I know it's been a little while, sorry, just life has happened, but I want to get back into these daily live streams. Today we're going to be live streaming an answer to question number 613 on my AMA, Self-Expiring React Component. This is from Samantha, and she is wondering what would be the best approach for a self-expiring React component, meaning after a certain date the component would unmount itself from the DOM. Thanks a lot. Okay, so I have a couple ideas around this. All of them involve hooks, and because hooks are great, but you could, if you're using an older version of React, you should hopefully be able to translate this back into older version of React stuff. So what I think will be the easiest thing to do and to start with is to, we'll make a component that is function I self-destruct, or I don't know, message. We'll just make a message component that will return a div that has hello there as the message, and then we'll render that in the app. Okay, so hello there is the message. We want to have some sort of mechanism for hiding that message. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a variable called should render equals false. And so then in here we could say if not should render, then we'll return null. Okay, right, so now we just need to make this dynamic, right? So it's going to render initially, and then after a certain date, it's going to change whether or not it's rendering. So this is what, when we have something that can change over time, some data that can change over time. What is that? That's state. So we're going to say our should render is going to be react.useState of, here we'll start it out as true, and then we can set should render here, and then we can make a change. So how do we want to make a change? Well, at sometime in the future, we want to change the should render to be false. And that would be a side effect. We want to schedule something to happen later. That's a side effect. So we're going to say react.useEffect, and we'll schedule a callback. And this callback, we only really want it to run one time. So when this message component is initially mounted, then we only want this to run one time. So we're going to add an empty array right there, signifying to React that this callback function should only be run on the initial mount of the component. And if there's a cleanup function that we return, that should only be run when the component is unmounted. Sorry, I should take a drink here really quick. So let's go ahead and I'll just go ahead, say set should render to false, and then it goes away. So perfect, but we want to do this after a certain amount of time. So what I'll do is I'll say set timeout, and then our certain amount of time we'll say is 500, or that takes too long. We'll say 100 milliseconds. That's 1 second, and then it goes away. Great. So far we've got something that will actually go away after a certain amount of time. Now, the question asker, Samantha, is saying, hey, I need it to happen after a certain date. So we're going to do a naive approach to this, and then I'll talk about some of the problems here. But yeah, so the certain date, well, that's pretty straightforward. Then we can say, because we know that this use effect is only happening once, this set timeout is only going to happen once. And so we can say that our set timeout should be whatever. Here, we'll take a date for when it should expire. So expiration, how do you spell expiration? Spell expiration. There we go. Date. So our expiration date is going to be sometime in the future. So what I'm going to do is I'll say new date plus 2000. No, we'll say plus 1000. And we'll put a new date around that number. I think that should work. So that will be 1000 milliseconds into the future, I think. Maybe, I'm not sure. We'll have to figure that out. we'll see. But then here we're going to have our expiration date. So the idea here is like ignore the usage example. We're focusing on the actual implementation. And in the implementation, we're going to accept an expiration date that will determine when this thing should stop rendering. So sometime in the future. And so what we can do with that expiration date object is we can say new date, or you can also say date.now. If that makes you more comfortable, though, we could do that here too, date.now. And we want that expiration date minus date.now. So that is the time in the future where this set timeout callback should be run, and we just render nothing on this component. So I'm getting a feeling that that's not, oh, yep, there we go. So it does show up, hello there, and then a second later it's gone. So yeah, that works. So you take some date that's sometime in the future, you pass it to this message component, and then you get the difference between those two dates, between now and the date in the future. And then you can have a callback that will update the state on whether or not it should render. So this is like the ultimate, like simplest solution to this. So there are a couple optimizations we're going to make here. I'm going to return a cleanup function. This is going to be our timeout ID, and this will simply just do clear timeout ID. Another thing to be aware of here is that set timeout is not exact, like down to the millisecond. So if it's like you need it to be perfect down to the millisecond, then this could get a lot more complicated. But I don't think that we really need, like, this is more of a user experience thing. They're not going to be able to observe if we're off by 100 milliseconds even. So I think we're probably fine with using set timeout here. Yeah, one other thing to be aware of, and this is actually interesting. So last night I was, I wanted to watch an episode of one of my favorite shows called Studio C on BYU TV. And we went to the site. So their shows are broadcast on Monday nights at 7 o'clock. And then sometime after that, it's available for watching just on demand. And so we went to the site, and it said it would be published in like an hour or something. And so you couldn't watch it for another hour. And I was kind of bummed by that. And I thought, I wonder if they're doing client-side comparison there to the current date, because date.now is relative to the client, like wherever that JavaScript is running. And so date.now for me is going to return a different time than it would for you. Based off of where you are on the globe. And so a user here could just say, oh, well, I'm too late. I'm going to change my clock. You just change your local clock to be like 3 days ago or something. And then they can see what you don't want them to see. So just don't trust any of the code that you're running in the browser, basically, because users can do all kinds of things because they're the ones that are running the code. So if it's really important that they aren't able to interact with something, then make sure that validation is happening on the server, is all I'm trying to say. So yeah, let's see. There was one other thing I wanted to do about this, and I wanted to make a custom hook for this because I feel like that's probably a pretty useful thing. So I'm going to make a function called expiration, or use expiration. And that's going to have, it'll just take the expiration date. And then we're going to take all that stuff. And we'll return should render. And then we'll get, should render from use expiration date. And now you can use this anywhere. In fact, we could have multiple messages that render or don't render based off of the should render. Another thing that we could do is we could take renderable thing, I don't know, whatever you want to call that, and we could do the logic right in here. So we could say it, or here we'll just return, So we'll return if we should render, then the renderable thing, otherwise we'll return null. And then we can put our renderable thing in here, and we could just return that. And that would work as well, which is pretty cool that we can do that here. I'm going to make this last a little bit longer. I think that's pretty neat that that works. So yeah, I'm kind of feeling like here. I'm getting the impression that this isn't actually 1.5 seconds. Oh, maybe it is 1.5. Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, so I think that this works. This seems like a pretty reasonable way to solve this problem to me. I'm not sure if I would do it quite this way. I might back up here and do it that way, like we were doing before. But I don't know, you can do it either way. Play around with it, see how you want to make that happen. So that's it. Hopefully that's helpful. Let me just answer a couple of questions in the chat, and then we will sign out. So recommended laptops for React developers and programmers. Yeah, you can use anything. I don't know. I personally really like Macs. Most of the tools on NPM work pretty well on Unix-based systems, and so I've never really had any trouble. They're just kind of expensive. Can one nest hooks inside of hooks? Absolutely, David Smith, you can. So if you have a custom hook and would like to nest it in another custom hook, totally possible. King Daro's got your back on that. What editor do I use? I use VS Code. Here, actually, let me go kcd.im/uses, and I think I need to do HTTP in front of that. So you can go see all the things that I use. This is Code Sandbox. I use this a lot for demos like this because it's really easy and fast to do that. And when I'm all done, you can look at all of this code and play around with it and stuff and fork it, and it's really nice. Would it maybe be more flexible if it just returned should render? Yeah. Yeah, so you can do whatever you want there. It could definitely be more flexible. You could also, going back to the using hooks within hooks, you could do a function use expiration UI, and that takes an expiration date. Here, we'll just copy all this stuff. And so then use expiration is just responsible for the data, and then use expiration UI would be responsible for rendering the right UI. So we could say return use expiration date. And if that returns true, then we'll return the renderable thing. Otherwise, we'll return null. And then the message component could use the underlying hook if it wanted, or it could like if it was simple enough or whatever, then it could just use the more abstracted away hook to do this. And you would have the flexibility to do either one, and they both work just as well. This one gives you a little bit more flexibility, but yeah, that's the nice thing about hooks is that they're so composable, it makes it easy to do this kind of thing. And they're just functions, so it's really easy to follow this stuff. Would you recommend adding expiration date to the second argument to use effect, like ESLint rule? Yeah, I suppose if you expect that the expiration date could change over time, then yeah, you could totally do that. Yeah, no problem. I could see that being yeah, that I'm glad you brought that up. That's totally a good idea there. So that way, if the expiration date does change, then you return a cleanup that will get cleaned up, and then you set up a new timeout based off of that expiration date. Minus date.now. Now I wonder if you passed an expiration date that was in the past, what happens there? So I'm going to do a set, or actually we'll just do this, minus 1000 milliseconds. Yeah, so it just goes away immediately, which makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think thank you for making that even better. Do you recommend returning JSX from hooks? Not typically. I don't think that's typically what most people are going to do, but I don't really see a whole lot of problems with doing that. One of the things with hooks is that it's more about logic reuse and sharing logic than it is about UI reuse, that we already have that from components. So hooks are mostly for the logic piece. Now, that said, I definitely see there are use cases for returning components or JSX, like React elements from hooks. I'm not going to say that's not something that you could do, but I can't think of any strong use cases off the top of my head right now for that. So, but play around with it. We need to make mistakes before we can know what the best practices are, right? So mess around with some things. Okay, completely unrelated. Any CSS lightweight framework for React? I don't know. I don't use CSS frameworks really. I kind of roll my own stuff. Sorry. Sometimes, actually, I will sometimes use Milligram CSS. I like this one. It's pretty small and easy. I like the way it looks. So, yeah, there you go. Isn't the message component going to stay in the VDOM even after the timeout? Yes, absolutely it will. All that this does is the message component itself is not going to be rendered. So what you could do if, well, I don't really see why you would want to do this, but what you could do is have the actual message div hello there. And instead, we would call this not a message component, but a self-destruct component. And then we do self-destruct right there. And then instead of this having its own thing, it will take children, and we'll just pass children there. And so then that's the way it works. So the self-destruct, that component will stay in the tree. That's just the way it's going to be. But that's like, I don't know why that would be a problem for anybody. Yeah, I can't think of any way to avoid that anyway. Either way, I don't really care because, yeah, it works out really nicely. That all that I really care about, like, so here's what I had before. I just have this message. I want it to self-destruct, so I'm going to wrap it in this self-destruct component. Now it self-destructs, so I'm happy with that. How can I get my first job as a React developer? One wants to know. I'm going to defer that to, well, I don't know. I can't really answer that question. It really depends on many things. Build lots of stuff. Sorry, that's not very helpful. Hooks are finally out and I really enjoy them. What's something you're excited about in the future of web dev? Hooks are pretty exciting for me. Reason ML seems pretty cool. I haven't really gotten into it, but it seems like a good idea. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but that's something I'm kind of excited about. Just want to say thank you. Oh, you're welcome. That's very nice. A couple retracted messages. Kent, do you have an idea of what would make most sense to use between refs, contexts, and HOCs to expose a component's class methods if the component only renders an iframe but not any children? I'm not sure exactly the use case, but it sounds like you could probably accomplish what you want to in a different way. But if you really feel like there's no other way, then you can look into use imperative methods as a built-in hook that I think is kind of built for situations like that. So you can go look into that. So Islam is saying, I've seen this pattern for custom hooks where we return value and component controls value. Would you recommend that? So I'm not sure what this means. Let me just pull that over here. So that where it returns a pair of values, that's like what useState does. The only reason that people are, or like the only situation where I would do that is when you have a value and a mechanism for updating that value. Any other time, I probably would just return an object or something like when you have a pair of values, this kind of makes sense. There's also state and dispatch when you're using the use reducer hook. So I'm not sure what this component controls value thing is, but yeah, typically use the API that makes the most sense for what you're building. Don't just use the pair value destructuring thing because useState does that. There's not really a reason to do that, I think. So do you recommend a library for event tracking? I don't have any library to recommend for that, sorry. Okay, I'm going to jump out. I hope that was interesting and fun. I will see you all tomorrow. I do hope to do these more daily as I have in the past. So yeah, good luck. I'll see you later.